Well, good afternoon. Walton County Sheriff Mike Adkinson here with my trusty public information officers, Ms. Corey DeBridney and Ms. Lindsay Darby, and this is the Sheriff Live. So, for those of you that are just joining us, this is something we do for me to report to my bosses, the citizens of Walton County, and our stakeholders in general. And this is kind of our virtual town hall meeting. We kind of do this to make ourselves available to the public to answer questions about things that are going on in the county and, maybe even something bigger than the county, depending on what's happening. I don't guarantee that I have an answer. I'll guarantee that I'll find one. I also don't guarantee that you're going to like the answer, so there's some of that going on too. So if you know where Walton County is halfway between Pensacola and Tallahassee in the Florida Panhandle. We run from the Alabama line to the Gulf of Mexico, about 1,200 square miles, and the sheriff's office is a full-service public safety office. We encompass our road patrol, our law enforcement operations and all aspects of that, our jail. We are fire, EMS, fire rescue north of the bay in Walton County. We're animal control. We're a little bit of everything. We're 911 communications, and so we do quite a bit of services, and we're proud to serve citizens of Walton County. We've had a lot of stuff going on in the past month since we've been back on air. I try to do this twice a month, or typically twice a month, but we have been so busy here lately that literally Corey and I were going over the list of what's happened in the last 30 days, and there's so much. We just didn't want to forget it. And so we're going to run through a few of it. As always, please feel free to send your questions to us. I can't see your questions. You have to give Corey a minute to try and read them, and if she doesn't immediately get to them, we'll try and get to them as quickly as we can, but show a little grace. Sometimes they kind of pop up. I don't see your questions, so until she reads them, I don't know what they are. So, Mr. Brittany, where would you like to start today?
Well, I think we've had a couple instances happen recently that we want to cover just on
Sure.
our end. Most recent, we made an arrest in a shooting yesterday.
Right.
Booked in a 15-year-old from that shooting in Mossy Head last Thursday morning.
Yeah, and I think, for those of you aware, there was a shooting in the early morning hours last week in which a 11-year-old was struck by at least one round and suffered some pretty serious injuries. That child was taken to the hospital, and that obviously spurred an investigation. There was a lot of rounds fired into the residents there in the Mossy Head community. Investigators and patrol were on scene very quickly, as well as our EMS staff, and were able to go in and really do a comprehensive investigation. We've made an arrest now at this point, a 15, about to be 16-year-old. One of the questions that people ask, and it's there's a little bit of level of confusion of this, why was he taken to the juvenile facility? Well, under Florida law, he's initially has to be charged as a juvenile. Ultimately, he's potentially facing what is called a direct file up as an adult, but from day one, he has to be charged as a juvenile. Because we got some comments, I don't think people understood that. They said, why is he not kept in the jail for that serious of a charge? That's coming. The state attorney's office will review and decide what is the most appropriate charge and whether or not that should be upcharged to an adult. And then in that case, once he's adjudicated an adult, he can be held in an adult facility. So that's coming. Sure.
And what would you say to the people in the Mossy Head community? I know that there was people were rattled over it, and there was over 24 shots fired that night. Obviously, our agency responded quickly. I mean, what would you say to the people who?
So, I think a couple of things that are concerning, but also so the community themselves know that. First of all, that was a very professional, very quick response, and really a pretty quick arrest based on the information we had. So we had to develop some leads and had to move forward without disclosing what was in the search warrant, because we executed a search warrant a couple of days later. Really, some very technical police, very technical.
Complex forensic
stuff
evidence
that you would actually people be surprised once it does become public. However, I think the other thing that really troubles me is the age of the people involved, right? And the proliferation of firearms and guns. That's really hard to wrap our mind around, but unfortunately it's the world we live in right now. And a
targeted incident, but the intended target was not the victim.
Yeah, there were. The person shot was not the victim. It was not the person intended. Yes.
Yeah. And there's been a lot of community rallying around the 11-year-old. So we're excited to see that. We think it's amazing that they've really lifted him up. And I know.
And hopefully, again, his injuries, the some of them can be life altering, and so we're going to have to, that remains to be seen what the full extent of that is.
Yeah.
But I would tell you, he's extremely lucky to be alive, and
Yeah.
and that at the end of the day is where you start. Just be thankful that he's alive.
A couple questions coming in about this. Velma Jan Lockhart wants to know what the response time was that night. And then Randy wants to know, some family of the victim indicated that there have been more than one shooter. Is there any truth to that? I'm jumping on late if this has already been addressed.
No, it's still under investigation. At this point, we're trying to ascertain what the situation is. Still an ongoing investigation. I mean, obviously, we're not ready for full prosecution yet. There was enough to make the arrest. We're confident that is a shooter. The other thing is, are there other weapons out there? Even if they weren't used in that particular instance, we're trying to do a comprehensive job of ascertaining, is there something else? The other thing is, when you're dealing with juveniles or young people in general, a lot of times what you have is exaggerated stories about what's going on. So we're having to work through a lot of that as well too. At this point, we seem to be in the right place. We're very confident that we have our shooter at this point. Whether or not there are other people that are involved, and when I say involved, I knew about it, had some idea, covered it up, hid evidence, things of that nature, that still remains to be seen, and we're still going to work toward that. Response time was pretty quick. So a deputy was there within a few minutes.
Yeah.
And that's a very quiet, that's actually a very quiet community, and so when you have the number of rounds that were fired there, obviously that stood out, and that got an immediate response.
Yeah, I think that they're, and rightfully so, and Captain Cosin and I spoke about this a lot since that shooting happened. I think a lot of people had some concerns. Obviously, they're scared, and they live out there. We want to reiterate to the public that we would never withhold something that is of public safety.
Yeah, we're not going to do that. In fact,
and we wouldn't do it at the expense of a case.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now, if we have any kind of credible threat or anything in the nature to indicate that someone is at risk or something past that, obviously we don't know about it before because, we'd be able to prevent that if we did. But there's nothing in any way, shape, or form indicates anything past that at this point. Now, things like destroying evidence, things like hiding evidence, things like, those types of things are still things that have to be examined. And as to whether or not somebody else had some level of involvement, we need to be aware of that as well.
Yeah. Ashley Clark is commenting, and she said it's her little brother that was in the shooting, and he's doing good, and he started eating today.
That's very good.
So that's
I'm glad to
great.
hear
Thank
that.
you, Ashley. Caught up on questions there, so I want to move to the next big thing that we have to talk about today, and that is we had a tragic instance happen down on Highway 98 where a child was killed.
Sure.
Preceding that, an article came out in the Daily News kind of talking about traffic fatalities in the county.
Yeah.
I think everybody can attest to the fact that was a horrible situation down there. Shut down the road for several hours, and now a local family, is having to deal with that.
So there's so much tragedy in that, and the reality of it is that nothing we do there is going to bring this child's life back. And that's what's really sad about that. It's a very busy intersection. It's certainly a tough intersection to cross as a pedestrian. That will be under investigation by the Florida Highway Patrol. They'll handle traffic fatalities. And I don't want to comment too much on it other than that, but I can tell you just the immediate review from our standpoint, our kind of a cursory review is it's a tragic accident. There's just no other way to put that.
Yeah. Moving on to some other, Mossy Head has been a hot spot for activity
we've had a lot going
as
on
of
there.
late.
Yeah.
And
stolen car.
A few days ago, we had a stolen car in the area, a manhunt, if you will, where a suspect was arrested.
Yeah, and listen, he had an interesting situation where you got somebody trying to jump in the back of a sheriff's truck to get away from the dogs. But yeah, we were able to stop.
Dogs were friend-shaped.
Not
biting.
Exactly.
Not biting.
So those individuals were caught. They were actually out of Jacksonville, and both of those subjects were caught after a brief pursuit and then a little bit longer manhunt through there. But we were able to catch both those folks and bring them into custody, which is good. It's kind of a funny picture if you've seen that online with, I think it's Deputy Kane behind one of the suspects. He literally jumps in the back of the patrol car trying to get away from the dogs. So
yeah, and we can't say enough nice things about Walton CI, Okaloosa CI, Home CI, they always come out like super
It's a great
quick.
partnership.
Our
I mean,
drone,
it's
our
a great
drone team was in the area really fast.
We've put a lot of use in drones in the last year. Our drone unit is getting a lot of use. They're providing a lot of service. In fact, I authorized buying a little bigger drone here earlier this morning, or looking at getting a little bigger drone this morning.
So Kevin Chilcutt has a question.
Okay.
I think a friend in Mossy Head posted about fast drivers running off the road and into his yard. The county recently put Phil down to fix the shoulder. He says he'll be sending videos of offenders to the SO. My advice was to contact a deputy in charge of that area and find a solution.
Sure.
So just people running off the road in Mossy Head and damaging the...
So we have really two problems there. It's not, Mossy Head and 20 are Highway 20 and Highway 90 are similar in that they're two-lane roads, right? And so there's such a substantial amount of traffic that even when a deputy's on one end or the other, they're not able to overtake and, to get, say, from Mossy Head to the outskirts of Defuniak Springs. We're affected by that traffic too, which is problematic. Both those roads need to be four-lane roads. Highway 20 is even worse. With the expanse of Hammock Bay and what's going on there. So those are two areas, that I think the board, I'm not sure exactly how they prioritize their infrastructure on building roadways. I mean, those are two actually state DOT roads, right? But from our standpoint, the best time to build a road was 20 years ago. And we're just so far behind in building roads that it's difficult to manage the amount of traffic that is going down these things. Yeah. That's probably the number one request we get pretty much every day is, I would say, probably maybe 20 people a day call wanting their specific road more enforcement of the roads. So that just tells you the volume of traffic going on, the need to expand. We have the same problem here off 38. There needs to be a cut-through road between 38 and 98. I know a lot of people get mad when I say that, but it needs to exist. It's a safety issue, but also, again, 20 and 90 both need to be four-laned.
Yeah.
Absolutely need to be four-laned.
Yeah. Devin Vernal, any update on the death of the 4-year-old on the back of the bike in the semi? We briefly touched on that.
Florida Highway Patrol will handle that investigation. It's a very tragic situation, though.
Randy, a family member called 911 for an ambulance last week. It was over 10 minutes for a Delta call, possible heart attack. Spoiled to under 5 minutes response times in the past. Any new ambulances coming that respond faster to the Woodyard Road area? Not a complaint. I understand they're doing all they can. Very professional and knowledgeable care. Just hoping we're making plans to get fast.
Yeah. So kind of two things. One, we want to add another ambulance. That was in our
we just got
plan.
Two brand new ambulances.
Well, actually, I'm in a new ambulance crew. We want to add another ambulance crew. We are still really impacted by the hospital not be open yet. We're anticipating that hospital being open sometime soon. And I will tell you, we're also going to go into a little bit of a partnership where a private company is looking at doing non-emergency transports to help us north of the bay. That will allow us to focus more on 911 transports. We're in the process of trying to have that done. That would really hopefully free up some of our crews. We ultimately should have another ambulance and crew north of the bay. Absolutely. I'm telling you, it gets to be rough when you have one crew in Fort Walton and one in Crestview. You've got a real problem because we're now having to pull from all across the county. So that's a tough situation. But I think a new crew is absolutely needed. But here's the thing: when you talk about a new crew, it's $3 million. A new ambulance, new crew, $3 million. Yeah. Is what it costs.
And while we're on that subject, touch a little bit on the fact that we are building new fire stations.
Yeah, so let's talk about Mossy Head real quick. So we are in our budget that we're just submitting now that we're going forward with, we are putting in to build a new fire station at Windswept, which is off of Highway 20, if you don't know where that's at, outside the Freeport community. The station there is actually a double-wide trailer that was bought in 2007 as a temporary solution. And it had never been replaced. So that is in the process. We're trying to replace that now. The idea is the station is probably going to be up on 20. It may stay in the back of Windswept, but we're looking for property right in the front of 20. That station hopefully will start in construction next year, if budgetarily approved. Call it $5 million. It's pretty expensive, $4 or $5 million. Mossy Head, We're looking at a 4-base station in Mossy Head that is desperately needed because Blackstone Golf Course was just sold, and they're anticipating a bunch of development coming on there. And really for that community, they deserve to have a fire EMS station, a good station there. So we've got a piece of property there already secured. It's close to where Mossy Head Elementary School is at, and hopefully we're going to start some construction on that inside of 12 months. And then the third one we're looking at is Pleasant Ridge, the Pleasant Ridge community, which is out in the Aliqual area, and so hopefully we can make that happen. That will go with the other stations that are currently under construction, which is Choctaw. That is slated to be finished, we think, in July maybe, and then Glendale, which is hopefully going to break ground in the next few weeks. But to kind of give you an example of how crazy the costing of things are, when we budgeted Choctaw, we budgeted for $1.5 million. That was the estimated cost. Now the same station is going to cost $6 million in Mossy Head, which is just unbelievable to me.
Yeah.
Basically the same station.
Yeah. And so Choctaw is currently underway. Glendale is getting ready to be underway,
Yep,
and the
correct.
next two slated would be Windswept and Mossy Head.
Windswept, Pleasant Ridge, and Mossy Head is what we're looking at.
Yeah. Great. Okay. Gene Bunkley, have y'all found any of the stolen dogs from the two with the stolen car? My wife says one is who cussed her out for stopping them while stealing a neighbor's dog. I think when that stolen car was pulled over in
Right,
Mossy Head,
right.
there was a lot of similarities between that vehicle
Right, and the vehicle where the animals were stolen.
Yes,
Right.
and I'm not sure if we have linked those or not. My understanding is that those two were coming through Duval.
My understanding those were separate, so I'm not sure about following up with the dogs. I'll have to get an answer to that.
Yeah. Brian Holmes, what are things recently put up on Juniper Lake Drive and Walton Road that look like cameras?
I don't know unless are they flock cameras? Yeah, they're flock cameras, so where we can use that to monitor flow of traffic, things like that.
Riley Peacock, hello, Sheriff. Did you see the new Dune film? And if also, would you rate it from 1 to 5 stars?
I have not.
Are you a movie critic? Do you watch movies?
No, I read the original. I'm going to go back and read. I had to.
Oh, you've read the book?
Yeah, I read the book.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
I got that kind of nerd in me, yeah. Hadn't seen it yet, but I plan on checking it out.
The first one was really good.
Yeah. I like the 1984 version, but since that was before you were born, you know.
I was -3.
Yeah.
Todd Campbell, will the 331 Bay Bridge be closed due to the weather conditions tomorrow morning?
Probably not, unless the sustained wind speed gets over the maximum sustained for a period of time. Don't anticipate that at all.
But what you can anticipate is Walton County School District will have a delayed start tomorrow.
That's correct.
They've announced that earlier, so I think it's 3 hours, Lindsay? Is that what they said? 3-hour delay. So you'll see buses at a later time tomorrow morning that you probably wouldn't normally see. But we don't anticipate the bridge being closed. Diana wants to know, I know there's a ton of questions being asked, and I know Mossy Head is a big subject, but I have a question regarding Morrison Springs.
Okay.
There was so much drug use right out in the open Sunday around children. What happened to the deputy that used to be posted there?
So what happened is they used to contract with the deputies, an off-duty deputy, that we would put somebody there all the time. The county has not started that back up, but we'll certainly go back and look at it. The other thing is, talk about these flock cameras. We need to have a camera back down there working full-time. We had a little bit of problem with connectivity. That was really our issue, so that we could monitor it from our dispatch center. Hoping to get that corrected as broadband is extended throughout the county. We think that we're going to be able to have surveillance cameras up there, which is, security cameras, if you like that term better. But we hope to help impact that. I'd love to have a deputy back out there, but just, pragmatically, we every month have about 400 requests for deputies to work off-duty jobs that we cannot fill. We simply do not have enough people to do that.
And explain.
But the county, just so you understand, we always prioritize the county's needs first. So if the county says we need X, Y, Z there, or a traffic situation, something like that, they always come to the top.
Explain what an off-duty detail
So
would entail.
for instance, if you have a concert, let's use that for example. We had a concert like Moon Crush where you have 5,000 people at a concert. what happens is the promoters or the concert,
Venue.
the concert venue, a lot of times will contract with us where they offset the cost to have security there, and they'll hire deputy sheriffs. They still work for us. They perform deputy sheriff functions, but they are saying since we are causing this need, we will offset the cost. So that's the way that works. So it's a good way to kind of defer that.
Yeah, and Diana, I've made a note to follow up about the Morrison Springs off-duty deputy, and we'll touch base the next time we go live. Chris,
But I will say it didn't look like Vortex Springs though.
it did not. No. Chris Borden, is someone communicating with FDOT about the recent issues at the light of 3:31 and 20 in the mornings in Freeport? I can tell you, and Sheriff, I'm not sure if you were aware of this, but Lieutenant Smith noticed that they were replacing the signs, the speed limit signs south of Business 331 on 220 down to 55 miles an hour. That was an error, and they came back and put the 65 back up.
Good.
So I know that Lieutenant Smith has been communicating with FDOT about some of the things that they're seeing.
The other thing is the backup at that turn lane from 331 to 20 is not enough. It's not sufficient amount of time to clear that traffic.
Yeah.
And it's backing up even farther on 331. So that's an issue as well there.
In both directions, really.
Both directions,
Yeah. And on 20, it gets backed up quite a bit too. Catherine Kramer, your comments on no-knock warrants. She wants to know.
There's a time and a place for no-knock warrants, for sure. The court has set out some things that are, you specifically have to request a no-knock warrant. There has to be a reason for a no-knock warrant. Quite frankly, most of the time there's enough time to knock, because what you don't want is somebody, you don't want somebody that is going to arm themselves, somebody that's going to destroy evidence or something like that, right? But there's a little bit of balance there. It doesn't take that long to do an announcement, typically speaking. So there needs to be a parameter. There needs to be a pretty serious risk to be a no-knock warrant.
Yeah. Devin Vernal, why is the hit and run death of Jacob Dixon a cold case when the person who hit him clearly has a life with children? How is it a cold case when you could very easily figure out who it is? I'm not sure who Jacob Dixon is.
I'm not sure either. We probably if you explain to me where that accident happened, then we'll talk about that. Okay. If it's a hit and run, it's been handled by the Florida Highway Patrol, though, not the sheriff's office.
Yeah. Devin, if you just want to give us a little bit more information about year, time, where it occurred. That the name doesn't sound familiar.
Yeah, and if it's a hit and run, it's being handled by that. It wouldn't be handled by this agency.
Yeah. Velma Jan Lockhart, with there being such a substantial amount of traffic crashes, why are you not concentrating patrols and traffic enforcement to get us out of the top 10 for traffic crashes in Florida?
I'm actually glad you mentioned that. It's two things. One, you have about 5 million people that come to this county, 5.5 million that come as visitors. Well, that has a pretty serious impact. And you have basically 4 major roads, right? Notwithstanding the other side roads. Secondly, that article was wrong. It had 40-something more deaths than we have. I'm not even sure. As I understand it, a law firm did the research on that, and then they put it out. The problem is it doesn't match what the Highway Patrol says or what our records is. They have literally 40-something more deaths than that even happen. So they're incorrect about that. Notwithstanding that, yeah, we've just added a traffic unit to all 3 districts to work toward all 4 districts they were already in District 3 and 4. But yeah, we're adding traffic units. So.
And that's not.
But I'm kind of surprised. I was kind of surprised to see that, because if they had called and done a little check, they could have found out pretty quickly those numbers didn't match. Because when we call the Highway Patrol, they're like, we don't know what you're talking about. So sometimes the newspaper gets it wrong. Shocker.
And that's not to say we've done initiatives, and I want you to talk a little bit about how we tracked major intersections over.
Yeah, so we reduced fatalities, in 2022, we target certain intersections. So that's the way we actually do it. We look and say, where are there the most fatalities? And then every year we look and say, okay, what enforcement can be done at those intersections to reduce the risk of death. And so one year we reduced from 35 to 21. Well, that's just not numbers. That is literally, 13, 14 families that didn't lose their loved one, which is super important. The other thing that happens a lot is a lot of them are on I-10, and they're because of the speed on I-10. When you're running 80 miles an hour, the likelihood of a fatality is actually much higher. We don't typically patrol I-10 to try and reduce traffic. Just simply don't have the resources for that, but a lot of them come from the interstate.
Brendan Mayhew, how could we go about getting more patrols in the Gaskin area? We've had a lot of vagrants walking around at all hours throughout the day and night and loitering on abandoned property.
So for sure, anytime you see somebody loitering, anytime you see somebody walking around, go ahead and call us. That's what we're here for. Let us stop by and just talk to them, identify who that is. We've had some problems up in that community. James Pittman's your district lieutenant. I know he watches this, so I'll make sure that he reaches that back out as well too. But I guess the short version is I want to make sure that if you see somebody, go ahead and call us. That's not going to bother us. That's our job. Let a deputy go out there and identify who it is, and let's see what we're in the process of doing a homeless person census. And a lot of times people don't believe or don't think about the north end, particularly Gaskin, Darlington, the Paxton area, Glendale up there. They don't think about people being homeless there, but it does happen. And sometime with the vagrancy up there, that leads to problems for sure.
Martha Winger, I need a 4-way stop at Chat Holly and J.D. Miller Road. The school traffic is becoming very unsafe with cars speeding up and down Chat Holly.
For sure. We can, pass that on to County Public Works and let them know to take a look at that. I know exactly what you're talking about. I actually agree with you about that. And it also helps slow the speed down on Chat Holly.
I'll make a note of that. And
we'll follow up and send that in.
Yeah. Lucas Tanner Adkins wants to know what your Starbucks order is. How do you know that?
Coffee,
like
heavy
he doesn't
cream,
even have
no
a
classic,
Starbucks.
8 pumps of sugar-free vanilla and cinnamon powder with a pinch of salt.
Did you get that?
Tell them I sent you.
Yeah. Just say, hey, the sheriff told me to order his drink, and they'll make it for you. If you go to Grand Boulevard or Defuniak Springs, they will know.
And if you go to Perla, I have my favorite there. My Perla order is different. So if you go to Perla and Defuniak Springs, it's different. But if you go to Starbucks, tell them I sent you. They'll get you hooked up.
I don't know how he knew that because you don't even have a Starbucks in the frame, but that's scary. Randy, probably a dumb question, but can tickets be written and mailed using the flock cameras on 90? Drivers are more aggressive and scary than I've ever seen on 331 and 98. I know you're all sick of hearing it, but it's truly terrifying driving that road over the last year.
Yeah, listen, I think that's a legitimate concern. I mean, it is a legitimate concern and complaint. No, we cannot use the flock cameras to do that. And I have to tell you, the public is overwhelmingly against ticket by camera. But, I will tell you something that can be done that's rarely done, which is you as a citizen, if you can identify the driver and you can identify the car, then we can put your name to an affidavit. You just have to be willing to come forward too and do it as well to issue a citation. And I don't have any problem doing that. You just have to be able to sign and say, I know Bob Jones. I know this car. I saw him. I saw XYZ, and we can take a look at it. But I can't use those as speed measurement devices. The law won't allow me to do that.
The flock cameras.
The flock cameras, yeah.
And you've been asked about red light cameras and speed cameras before.
Yeah, I think the public is just so adamantly against it. And the other reason is sometimes the driver's not the owner, which that causes some issue. And the other, and then even a third part of that is we as a body, we don't fund ourselves with traffic tickets, right? And I think it's one of those things where I think the public believes that's the case. And so we have to be careful that we're not in this to be a revenue.
If we stopped issuing traffic tickets, we would not cease to exist.
No, we would not cease to exist.
Kevin Chilka, geographically large county, rural and urban, expensive and hard to cover. Technology helps, but getting from point A to point B is simply a physical problem.
On four roads. Yeah, I mean, if you're going to go north and south in this county, you will go US 331, right? And if you're going to go east and west north of the Bay, you're essentially going to go Highway 20 until you get to 90 in Defuniak, 20 in Freeport, and then 98. So that is really a tough problem. And so driving in traffic, we actually face the same problems you guys do trying to get people there. And go back to what somebody said, the issue with the ambulance, which I think is absolutely true. When one of our units gets out of place, in other words, if they have to go somewhere else, it just doubles the drive time, for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely a geographical.
Yeah,
challenge.
it's a unique unique situation.
Which is also the same, really, on the fire rescue side of the house. I mean, when you're a paramedic in a small city, or even a big city for that matter, your drive to the hospital is minutes. When you're in a county such as ours, it's pretty significant. You're driving 45 minutes to a hospital as a paramedic, so it's challenging on both sides of the house. On Twitter, LP asks, do you plan to address abuse, assaults, and threats by your jail staff against inmates?
So that's one of those questions where you're trying to elicit a response from me, right, without being specific or without saying what it is you don't talk about. We do not allow, or nor do we abide by the abuse, harassment, or unethical behavior by any staff, regardless whether at jail or anywhere else. But you have an obligation, if you believe that exists, to be specific about it and file a complaint and put a name on it. It's no more complex than that, and then we're going to look at it. But
We've
remember,
arrested and fired our own correctional deputies.
Absolutely,
and held
we've
people
arrested
accountable.
staff over the years and held them accountable. I've had them booked back in the jail. But just because somebody says it doesn't make it true either, right? You have an obligation to be investigated and looked at and entitled to the same rights as any other citizen.
Amanda Pettis, why the increase in criminal activity in Mossy Head, and what is being done to prevent this and protect the residents?
Honestly, a little random, quite frankly. The one vehicle just happened to be out of Jacksonville. The other, the shooting was certainly in that community. But we've made quite a few arrests there lately. So here's the catch-22. If I put more people in there and they're making more arrests, is there more crime? See, that's the problem. If I make more arrests, then you say, do I need more deputies? And so it's always a little bit of a rub. I think the fact they've been proactive is the reason we're also seeing some of these arrests as well, too.
Devin Vernal is asking about the Jacob Dixon case again, and again, I'm not familiar with that case, and if it happened in our county, it would be a Florida Highway Patrol case. Tiffany Hall, good afternoon, Sheriff. I have a quick question that's off topic.
Okay.
I have a situation with a corrections officer that is showing off his motorcycle and is putting children in jeopardy in my neighborhood. We've asked him several times to stop and even gotten law enforcement involved, but it seems like there's nothing they can do. What are your recommendations?
Go ahead and put the details of your concern and complaint attach it and forward it to Major Dustin Burleson at the Walton County Jail, and he will look into it and also provide your response as appropriate.
And we'll make sure, Tiffany, to jump on here and
follow back up with it, to make sure it's followed up with.
Yeah, and we'll give you an email that you can email, and we'll make sure that it gets to him.
For sure. So just follow up at the end of this, and we'll get there.
Yeah. Cassandra Calloway on YouTube. Okay. Can you talk a little bit more about the shooting that injured the 11-year-old boy? Was this a random act, or was this an ongoing feud?
I've got to be careful what I say, because obviously this is going to end up being an attempted murder case, at the end of the day, and so it was not random. That's the short version of that.
Yeah.
It was a targeted attack, but the wrong person.
Yeah. Without enough deputies to cover the existing residential areas, this is from Carol on Facebook, why are there continued clearing for new roads and dozens of new home sites barely wide enough for a single wide trailer?
That's going to be a little bit outside of my control. That has to do with building and planning. And look, here's the reality: we're somewhere between the 6th and 10th fastest growing county in the nation. We're always in the top 15, and it's going to continue to grow. We are steadily hiring. I hope this year to have hired an additional 20 plus deputies, but right now I have about 20 in training, which is, obviously makes it pretty difficult. It takes a long time to hire a deputy sheriff. Why does it take so long? Because we don't just hire anybody. We hire character and we teach skills. We'll get caught up with that, and we'll get the staff we need to be there. I mean, I think people are very supportive of that. It just takes a little bit of time. We're recovering from still that kind of post-COVID, post-George Floyd, people not wanting to be engaged in law enforcement. And one of the biggest factors we're facing now, honestly, is that the cost of housing is so high here. It's outrageous. You've got one-bedroom apartments that are over $2,000. And so listen, if you're a teacher or you're a deputy sheriff or a firefighter or a detention deputy or you drive a motor grader, whatever your job is, in those working class jobs, you cannot afford $2,000 a month. You just can't. I'm moving the deputy sheriff's salary up this next week. We'll go to a little over 55,000. The plan is to go to 60,000 over the next 2 years. But it's expensive to do that, right? It's a large organization. We're moving our firefighters' salaries up. The same thing, detention. So these are things that are going to help. I just can't do it immediately because there are budgetary constraints with that.
Yeah.
But we need housing. Housing is a critical issue in this county. Housing and road infrastructure is a critical issue.
Yeah. Michelle Canterbury on YouTube, do you foresee the need to close the beaches again at night as the summer season approaches like you did during Atlanta's spring break?
Listen, I hope not. I hope not, but we reserve the right to do what's in the best interest of the safety of our citizens. You know, that's not to be cryptic. I just would say at any given day, if that decision has to be made, we'll make it.
And in full transparency, I think, last year, we had a pretty successful spring break. And then we hit 4th of July.
We essentially had 2 days where we had
Yeah.
real problems. Before that, everybody said what a great way it was being handled. So we've had a really successful spring break so far, or over the spring break, we handled that pretty well. Again, it probably cost $1 million to do that. $600,000 just in overtime, not regular staffing, but $600,000 just in overtime for a few weeks. I know that Memorial Day is coming up. So so for those of you who don't know, our average daily population of the county now from Memorial Day forward is bumping 300,000 people. And so we just have to make adjustments based on what the circumstances are. The issue on the beach then was a little strange because it was young children, 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old, high school age. So these are kids that didn't drive themselves down there. They had parents, and it was the parents not being parents that were part of the problem. Right, so we're having to deal with that, and a lot of the kids were fine. A lot of them, what they did was nothing wrong. They're just large crowds. We're just having to figure out how to do it. That's a long way to say this. If necessary, I will do it again, but I don't plan on doing it.
Okay. Marta Spell Bohannon, we need a light at Rock Hill Road in 331.
Truth.
We have a hard time getting out.
You also need that turning lane to get done. That desperately need a turning lane there.
Yeah, I think that there used to be a flashing light at Rock Hill when it was one lane, each direction. And by the way, that was less than 10 years ago. Yeah. That 331 was one lane each direction.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people don't realize how it was not that long ago, and here we are. Well, now it's a 4 lane.
And you also have to balance this, because I remember that same time when this second bridge was being, citizen after citizen had stood up and said it's a waste of taxpayers' money to build another bridge across there. Now, does anybody want to argue with that now?
Yeah.
It was finished under budget and ahead of schedule.
Yeah.
And the tax went away.
Yeah.
But all the same people.
And you're not getting told every time you go over it.
You're not like Okaloosa County where you're getting hit for $4 and $5 every time. But I think a lot of times people forget that, because citizen after citizen lined up and said, we're going to unelect everybody involved in this if we do this.
And here we are.
By the way, we also paid for
Can you imagine if it wasn't built?
We also paid for 2 parks. I give the Board of County Commissioners credit on this, because they built 2 parks with that as well too.
Yeah.
Grady Brown is packed every day on the bay.
Pilcher
Park is packed. And so as much as we all, myself included, we love to get on the board every now and then, the Board of County Commissioners, that's a really good thing they did. The only thing would have made it better if they put lights on the bridge.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, I'm trying to go back. Devin Bernal is following up on the Jacob Dixon question. Florida Highway Patrol say they recovered the vehicle in Walton County hit and run Sunday morning. Florida Highway Patrol said about 4 a.m. A dark red Honda was traveling on 331 in Freeport. And just north of Sparkleberry, they hit Jacob Dixon, who was standing inside the lane of travel on 331. It was about 4 to 5 years ago. So they would have been, basically would have been the investigating agency.
They don't even give us updates on that. That's not something we actually handle. It's handled by the Florida Highway Patrol. I don't know what reason it would have been that they didn't follow through. I didn't say not follow through. My point is, I don't know what the status of that is. It's just not a case that we worked. But we can find out. I don't mind trying to get an answer, as long as you don't mind doing it through email, because again, I'm just not familiar.
So sorry, I'm trying to go through
comments and questions.
Comments versus questions. Catherine Kramer says, I know you didn't skip my question about Air Force member Roger Fortson, who was killed by Fort Walton police last Friday. You didn't ask that specific question, so I'm not that I've seen. And it wasn't Fort Walton police. It was Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office. She said, I want to hear our leaders condemn this.
You won't hear that. You're not going to hear me say that for two reasons. One, I am not aware of the factual basis of what's going on. And it's been a truism in this world that there is always more to the story. And the thing that should happen under a criminal investigation as a professional is that you wait to receive and cover all the facts. The other thing is you got to be careful not to confuse what you don't like with what's illegal, right? So those are two separate issues. I don't know everything surrounding that. I know there are two, just if you as a citizen want to kind of think about this for a second, there are two controlling court cases that really deal with use of force when you're talking about a law enforcement officer, a police officer, deputy sheriff, trooper, whatever. One of them, and I'm going to tell you so you can look them up. One is called Tennessee versus Garner, which deals with deadly force, and the other is called Graham versus Connor. And Graham versus Connor is probably the one most important from this standpoint. And it says, the court has held, that it does not have to be the least amount of force possible, right? The force has to be reasonable. So when you watch this video and you look at some of these other things, you have to say, what is reasonable when facing potential deadly force? I don't know, and I think it would be inappropriate for me to comment on the acceptability of what happened there when it's under investigation by not one but two separate agencies. So that's the reason. It's just a matter of being a professional and saying, hey, we're not going to do that based on what I know now, particularly since it's not my case.
Ashley Clark, my question is with my little brother. Have you found out who the other two suspects are? Because we heard there are other two suspects.
Yeah, I cannot comment anything about an open investigation like that over Facebook, for sure. So you can reach out to the investigator, and they can kind of tell you what they can tell you at this point.
Christy Bozeman said, plenty of Walton County Sheriff's deputies in Driftwood Estates community group, making sure no one runs a stop sign if you need them.
Very nice.
Brian Holmes, thoughts on police-involved shooting in Fort Walton Beach in Okaloosa County? We just spoke about that.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm going through some of these. Velma wants to know if the information is wrong, what is the correct number? Previous question about being ranked in top 10 traffic. Again, thank you for answering.
So we had it sit on my desk here looking at it a minute ago. I think they had
132 deaths in 4 years.
And it was actually 90.
It was 98. We didn't break 100. Now, what we did was we pulled 2018 through 2023, which is 2 more years than they did. And we barely broke the number that they had in their article. So that's not saying that there is a serious traffic problem, but I just think that it was not professional journalism. It was not responsible journalism to release something, a study, and not do research outside of it.
When it takes us 5 minutes to realize that you added 40 more deaths to it than are accurate, that immediately is a problem. It's an immediate problem.
And I think it's a misjustice of the facts, which is, like you said earlier, on any given day, our population more than triples our census, which Walton County is known for not participating in the census.
Yeah, right.
So I just think that it's a misjustice of the truth.
For
Again,
sure.
that is not taking away the fact that
we have serious traffic problem, and they need to be addressed. We have pedestrian issues here. I think we can all agree with that, with the need for sidewalks and more bike paths.
We have LSV issues.
Plenty of traffic issues, but that's just happens to be not accurate.
Yeah.
And it's not a little off. It's off by a bunch. 40 human lives is a lot to be wrong about.
Christy Bozeman said, we should spend less time on Starbucks and more time making sure our streets are safe. I've had several issues and can't get a phone call back with the sheriff's office. Christy, send me an email. I'm happy to respond to any question that you have. Melissa Missy Simmons Cobb, speaking of cameras and tickets, can a driver be cited from running a school bus stop sign when an officer is not present, but the bus driver catches the tag number?
If we can identify the driver, Ms. Cobb, yeah. If we can figure out who the driver is and positively identify, absolutely. Because if it's just the tag, if somebody else is driving, that may be a problem. Putting them behind the wheel, it's kind of the same. We just have to be able to identify the driver. If you will email the tag, the driver's name, and then I'll have somebody contact you and see if we can put together who it is, because the driver may have got to look at them, and those buses have cameras on them too. So if the bus camera may have captured something we could use to identify them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Sorry, I'm going through people's conversations. Philip Canterbury, the other day I kept seeing people not slow down or yield to emergency vehicles. I know you can't follow every ambulance and fire truck, but it is getting ridiculous.
It's a problem with deputies too. I mean, it's a problem with deputies have the same issues too. People trying to block traffic, not necessarily intentionally, but they're just not moving out of the way. And of course, under Florida law on the move over, same thing with work crews, but it is a dangerous situation for our first responders. And for our people that work on that roadway, for people not to get out of the way. Mm-hmm. So, yes, Mr. Canterbury, I agree with you. It's a problem.
James Jeff Walker. Sorry, not a question, but a comment. I've lived in the Panhandle for 43 years, and every deputy and fire rescue personnel are absolutely the nicest people I've run into.
Wonderful. Had
a brief conversation with a deputy a few weeks ago, and he loves working for Walton County Sheriff's Office.
That's awesome. We're glad to hear that.
Thank you. Erica Oakes. First, I want to praise your entire department. The entire group is impressive in how they conduct themselves. Second, how do we submit someone for a life-saving award? I've seen officers receive this award, which is well-deserved, but I'm aware of an instance where I believe an officer should have received an award and don't know how to go about nominating them.
Yeah, absolutely. We love that. Go ahead and...
I really like that, Erica.
If you'll email into our POs, somebody will follow back up with you and get the details, and yeah, we'd love to hear about it.
How do, just for the public's edification, how do you decide on a life-saving award?
They go to a committee, and then the other deputies and firefighters make a decision whether or not it meets above and beyond what they're supposed to do. And there's so many times that people do things, not just life-saving, that you don't hear about and the deputies don't ask. I got an email that Corey shared with me the other day, and from Leon County, where a deputy, Sergeant Fisher, stopped and changed a tire for somebody in Leon County, on his off time going through. I mean, that's a big deal. And of course, Jeremy, that doesn't surprise me at all. Sergeant Fisher does a great job. But that's what we say. We hire character. We teach skills.
You had Sergeant Jason Day go to a veteran's house on his day off to help him put up drywall.
Yeah, absolutely.
After
we got some good folks.
Yeah, we really have some great deputies. Carol Sumrall, thank you very much. I appreciate your dedication to the community. Erica Granzi, I'm going to be a Karen. Well, I appreciate the heads up. First of all,
a little warning. I like it.
I like the warning. If the cops are spending down the road with lights flashing, I think she meant speeding, but she put spending. So my eyes do not deceive me. I think I'm going blind. All right. If the cops are speeding down the road with lights flashing and they put on a siren, I'll move over if I see and hear you and use turn signals. I see this all the time. When running lights, people don't know you're barreling down the road. It's dangerous. I want to arrive alive and get to for you to get to the emergency as fast as you can. Thank you for all you do. I think her question is, when cops are speeding down the road with just their lights and not their sirens.
Yeah, so just to be clear, they shouldn't be doing that. The only time that you should be doing that is if you're close enough to the scene that siren may present a problem from a safety or tactical standpoint. So that's not being a Karen. I think that's a very legitimate concern. That's something we have spoken to deputies, and we'll counsel with that as necessary. You have to use the siren. The siren is there. The problem with the siren, there's an expression called outrunning your siren, which is, if you haven't experienced this, it's sometimes hard to hear those sirens. I mean, until they are right up on top of you.
Our new ones are not hard to hear.
Yeah, well, you'd be surprised when you're driving away. It's just something about the ambulatory.
Yeah.
The movement there causes a little bit of an issue auditorily, but that's not I don't think it's being carried. I think it's a legitimate concern. Typically, when they're cutting the siren, it's because you're coming somewhere that you don't want someone to hear you. But to drive without the siren we shouldn't be doing that.
Give an instance. A couple weeks ago, I got a question like that on our Instagram page. Like, would there be a reason for a deputy
there's
driving
definitely a
like
reason.
that?
So if I'm pulling up to maybe a domestic violence complaint. I may not want somebody hearing the siren before I pull up. If I pull up to a potential robbery, I don't want you hearing the siren. Anything where you might run before I get there, you're going to hear me.
Or it escalates the situation
Yeah, absolutely.
unnecessarily.
If you hear it before we get there, that's a problem.
Yeah. On YouTube, Steve wants to know, is it possible to provide a contact number for the traffic unit that covers the west end of 30A?
Yes. Yeah, we can get you the district lieutenant who'll get you, or the special operations lieutenant get you hooked up with that. Either one.
Okay. Rebecca.
And just do that by email and she'll get you fixed up with it.
Rebecca Allen, out of curiosity, what does your agency do to prioritize officer mental health? Thank you for all you do.
So we actually, I think,
Rebecca Walton. I'm sorry.
So I think we have one of the most forward-leaning mental health programs in the nation, and so I'm glad you got a chance for us to bring that up. I require mandatory mental health counseling for all safety-sensitive personnel. They have to go. To my knowledge, I'm the only agency in the country that does that. We do that every couple of years. That's the mandatory, right? We treat it just like we do our physicals or physical fitness tests. The second part of that is we make available counseling upon request that we cover up to a certain number of visits. We also, for any high-risk incident or high-trauma incident, we make it mandatory. So, for instance, a death of a child, an officer-involved shooting, a particularly gruesome scene, an emotionally charged scene, we will have people that either come to the scene or potentially, we schedule a time for them and we take people off duty until they had time to decompress and to be reviewed to make sure that they're okay. So yeah, I think it's critically important.
Don Schrampfer wants to know, when can we expect some arrests related to the 200 people that invaded and ransacked the empty $8 million home near Seaside?
Oh, I think it was almost 3 years ago now, right? The misdemeanor case. Yeah, I don't think there's going to be any race for that for a couple of different reasons. One, the state's attorney, you guys can read the letter, see for yourself. It's just not able to move forward at this point. Don't catch them all. Catch a lot of people. We don't catch them all, though. So.
And then Steve, I think I answered your question. He jumped back on Facebook to ask it just in case I hadn't seen it on YouTube. Debbie Heard called 911 this week in South Walton regarding a bike accident with injuries. The call went to Walton County and not South Walton Fire. Yeah. Many involved said that this has been going on for weeks. Transferred calls, delayed response. Why is this happening?
Yeah, I don't like the transferring of calls. That just happens when you have different PSAPs, or not PSAPs, different dispatch centers. So what happens is we are the primary PSAP, the primary receiver for 911 calls in Walton County. We dispatch kind of simultaneously. So for instance, if you need an ambulance and it's south of the bay, we'll go ahead and start sending a deputy, but we're going to transfer to South Walton because they like to do their own dispatch. They dispatch themselves. So both are being sent at the same time. It's just they run their own dispatch. So.
Tiffany Hall, the gentleman that I'm speaking about with the motorcycle and the reckless endangerment is the CEO at the Walton County Prison. I've been in touch with the warden secretary and I've yet to hear back from them. Can you help me when it comes to someone in that field? Yeah,
let me just try and get you a contact information and we'll do that offline and get it to him.
WaltonCounty.org on Facebook. If Trey Nick was elected president, would you accept the position of director of the FBI?
There would be a sign. What I would do is I want to be his driver. I think that's the job. That's my next job when I retire. I'm going to become a driver.
Like driving Miss Daisy?
Yeah, driving Miss Daisy. That's exactly what I would do.
Rich Foster. Good evening, Sheriff. I took your advice and called Captain Hogeboom, and now after many years of animal problems and an additional kitten pet, not a Grady Brown Park death, I am in hopes of her now taking the necessary action to rectify the problems incurred for so long. I'm not sure. I took your advice and called Captain Hogeboom, now after many years of animal problems and an additional kitten pet.
Sounds like you went up to the shelter and left with a pet, which is good. got a lot of pets that need homes out of our shelter. Hope that's what they're saying anyway.
Okay. Okay, sorry. Devin Vernal has a great question. When the person was arrested for killing the cat, this was the one that drowned the cat at Grady Brown Park, was and released on $5,000 bond. It's $500 because it's 10%. Are we legally allowed to advocate for mental health and animal cruelty outside of the courthouse for his next court date? And is the other cat at the Walton County Animal Control alive still? So I can answer the latter part of that question. What they did was when we have to take a cat, that individual has to sign the rights over to that animal, which I believe he did. And
a lot of times believe it or not, a lot of times they actually won't. Even somebody like that who has, drowned a cat, which what an unbelievable level of cruelty, right? A lot of times they won't sign those animals over and after, and we have to get a judge to do that. Now, in this case, I think he may have signed that cat over. So the cat's still alive, has to go through medical treatment and vaccines and things of that nature so that they can become adoptable from there. But back to your original question, can you advocate for that? You can certainly advocate for, it's a free country. You can assemble and advocate for whatever you believe is appropriate, as long as you stay within parameters that are not abusing, harassing, or anything of that nature. Yes, you certainly can.
Yeah.
And that case will be handled by the state's attorney's office. I mean, they're really the people. So if you have an expression of something that you want to say about the case, I would probably just call and leave a comment with the state's attorney's office here.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I'm kind of going through people's questions. Brian Holmes, we need to stop allowing people to head north out of Walmart and Defuniak Springs. It's very dangerous allowing people to turn left, cutting across 331. Agree, 100%. He's talking about the parking lot in the city limits.
What he's talking about.
Not to mention that it's dangerous for people already on 331 because you can't see them coming to take that left.
Correct.
And there's no turn lane, so you're really trying to get in the median to get out of the way. Totally agree with that. That's actually in the city limits.
Yeah.
So it would, I think, but if it's
city and DOT would still be involved because U.S.
It's
Highway.
on 331. Yeah. Okay. Philip Canterbury, what level of medical training do your deputies have?
So our deputies, the basic deputy is trained as a first responder, right? That's the basic. I can arrive on scene, apply bandages, do certain things, right? But they can't administer medicine, can't clear airways, can't do anything like that. So the next level up, obviously, is going to be an EMT, an emergency medical technician, right? Mm-hmm. They can do a certain level of things, and then there are certifications you add along the way up to paramedic and even past paramedic. Everything from PEDS certifications to what type of medication you can administer. So there's a whole levels that. But the basic, go back to your question, the basic deputy is a first responder, just like any other firefighter would be if they're not an EMT. So they're no different in the medical training given to a firefighter that's not an EMT and a deputy sheriff or a correctional officer from that standpoint. So it's basic first aid, compress, stop the bleeding, things of that nature.
But we do have deputies who are EMTs.
We actually pay for deputies that want to become EMTs. We actually have quite a number that are emergency medical technicians as well too. We don't make them do that because we want you to want to be able to do that. So
yeah, and all of our beach units are now EMTs.
Correct.
We
probably have actually. I would guess we have somewhere close to 25 deputies that were EMTs.
Mm-hmm. Ollie Walker, in addressing the shortage of affordable housing for officers in Walton County, is there any program that could be implemented or initiated that would allow them to live in local communities and cover part of the housing costs? Maybe offering the rental homeowner a tax deduction for a break in the monthly rent, or a program that might help them with the down payment if purchasing a house, trying to think outside the box.
Yeah, we've definitely trying to look at a bunch of different options. The problem is the median house price in Walton County last year, according to the property appraiser, was $510,000 was the median house cost of Walton County. So starter homes are now $300,000. Well, if you got to put 20% down, most people couldn't afford $60,000. Right, and that's not even closing costs. That's just the down payment. So even if you have a VA loan, for instance, or a low interest loan, that is a pretty tough payment at, if you're making $55,000 a year, that's a tough payment. And then, most average citizens do not have $30,000, $30,000 to put down.
Heather Generet, how many deputies does WCSO employ?
So there are about 225 through all disciplines. So what I mean by that is there are 30 in SRD. There are roughly 10 in the Judicial Services Unit. You have so many that are in judicial process, which is a little bit different. You have so many that do extradition. You have so many that are kind of mandated to do certain things. So yeah, that's not that many on the road. So if you look at a road patrol, somewhere in the neighborhood of 140, give or take.
And that covers.
Yeah, and I just so if you didn't ask, but I think the optimum number right now that we're trying to get to is somewhere around 250-ish, 255. I think if we get to 255 or somewhere close to that, we're going to be where we need to be. That's what we're shooting for. And right now, that's mostly about getting people hired. That's excluding detention, by the way. That's a difference, though.
Alina Farrell, huge thanks to Deputy Kuchner for cleaning up the drug house next door. Happy to hear that.
Wonderful.
Jamie Aaron, new to the area, is there a website to know when controlled fires happen and where? She's talking about prescribed burns.
Sure.
We typically will post when that happens, but Florida Forestry will post when they have prescribed burns. The tricky part is, and we're a little bit different, and Lindsay can kind of chime in here because she has to deal with a lot of this north of the bay, that people can burn on their own property.
Correct.
And they while they have to get a permit, that permit might not be publicly published somewhere.
Yeah.
So, Lindsay, I know we had quite a few fires last year where people are burning on their private property, and there may not be a public place to find those.
Yeah. But if it's done by a governmental entity, you're going to find it on Florida Forestry.
Yeah. A lot of people burn on their property, for various reasons, whether it's trash or trying to get rid of underbrush, things like that. Mm-hmm. So it depends on where you are in the county. Short version, Jamie, but Florida Forestry or your local.
It's under Department of Agriculture, Division of Forestry.
Yep.
So.
Rebecca Alton, with the unfortunate prominence of drug usage, is your staff trained in drug overdoses and Narcan?
Unfortunately, yes. It's a reality of the world we live in now. We administer Narcan, particularly our fire EMS crews, pretty extensively.
Dale Pugh, just dropping in to say the Sheriff Adkinson is the man. Thank you, Dale.
Appreciate it.
Diane Derbyshire wants to know, is there an email directory for WCSO and the jail? If you can hop on our website, waltonso.org, and if you drop under contact us, there should be like a generic list of emails and phone numbers for us. Abby,
and by the way, the easy way to do that, it's last name. What is it? Do you remember off the top of your head?
It's changed a lot since you've got new people that are hired.
Okay,
so
let's look at do what she said. Don't listen to me. Do what she said.
I would go to waltonso.org and
absolutely. Don't listen to me.
Hit the contact us tab. Abby Patterson, traffic is already crazy. What's the plan when they move in thousands of people in the new apartments on Business 331?
Yeah, it's
boy, do I know it.
Yeah,
I just bought a house right down the street.
It is a concern for us. We are right there with you. We are voicing our concern. I asked the Board of County Commissioners, Superintendent Hughes and I publicly asked him to talk about a long-term strategic plan for building and the infrastructure engaged in that, and we hope to get those meetings scheduled.
I really like how you segued into that, Sheriff.
You like that?
Yeah.
I'm hoping to, get that done in the next 60 days, to have those meetings. And then people can publicly weigh in on what they think is important. And that way everybody will know, and we'll all know what the left hand is doing. The left hand will know what the right hand's doing, so to speak. But yeah, so we have your same concerns too. And just understand that's not something they consult with us. They don't talk to us about. We have to go pull numbers from the building, and this is not a dig at them, but we actually have to go pull numbers from maybe the city of Freeport or the BCC about what's being built, because we see it going up and go, hey, what is this? What's happening? What's going to be the impact on the sheriff's office from that standpoint? So same concern.
Kelly and Lori Penton. Red light is needed at Defuniak and I-10.
True.
Exit on Highway 331.
I actually think they're considering that. I think they did some numbers down there. Don't 100% hold me to that, but I think they were actually in the process of doing a study there.
It's scary going through there. And I think people get frustrated because they sit there for so long and they can't get out.
Sure.
Especially if you're coming off I-10 and you're trying to go
and
south on 331.
when people get frustrated, they do things they shouldn't do.
Yes.
They try and go around people. They take risk.
Yeah. She also said dump trucks continue to go well over the speed limit on Highway 331 through Freeport. Talk a little bit about, because I have seen FHP's commercial vehicles pulling over quite a few people on the side of the road.
Yeah, they've been working that area pretty heavy. We have a good relationship with the Highway Patrol, Major Fast, who's based out of Panama City, and we speak, and certainly they're willing to assist where they can. But I'll tell you something about, here's the sheriff taking up for the Florida Highway Patrol, so get ready. In the 1970s, there were about 2,300 troopers in the state of Florida in the 1970s. In 2024, there are 2,000 troopers in the state of Florida. So, a comparable sized state has about 10,000 troopers in it. That's how small the Highway Patrol is. So, you're talking about being understaffed. That's a great example of being completely understaffed. When your staffing is the same as it was in the 1970s, there's a problem.
Yeah. Velma Jan Lockhart, does a person's immigration status have any relation to their propensity to commit criminal acts? No. Asking this due to the comments made on the post with the juvenile shooting in Mossy Head. Again, thank you for doing live to address all questions and concerns.
No. And I'm always reticent to this because regardless of how you feel about illegal immigration or immigration in general, those things, that is not indicative of criminality, right? There are people that commit crimes that are here illegally. There's no question about that. At the same time, there's a vast number of people who work and try to make a better life. So that's not me commenting on how I feel about immigration. I'm just saying bluntly, being here illegally doesn't mean you're here criminally, or you're going to be a criminal. What's the chance of somebody misunderstanding what I just said there?
High.
Yeah, I thought so.
Very high.
Yeah.
Rita Hentz, if the common citizen knows where drug houses are, why do officers not get them?
Well, so here it's kind of that's actually a pretty good question. So we probably get 80 residences a month where people said, I know they're dealing drugs there. And the conversation usually goes something like this. Well, how do you know? Well, I see them come and go all night. I see people coming in the window and I see those kind of things. For us, we just can't say, people come and go all hours of the night. That's a drug house, and we know people arrested have been drugs there. We have to be able to prove it, and the law says there's certain things that we have to do, right? Like get a search warrant, have a controlled buy out there. Unless we can prove if there was physically drugs in the residence, and prove it is not, I saw people coming and going, or I know they use drugs, or you can tell they use drugs, or whatever. I have to be able to prove it. We have so many people calling about different residences and houses. We have to target them one at a time. We can't do everyone all the time. We've had some pretty major drug arrests here, multi-kilo of fentanyl and heroin in the last 60 days, not kilos of that stuff. And unfortunately, there's still 40 or 50 houses, 60 houses that we know that we're trying to get to. But remember, it has to be in the house when we get there. So it's not that we don't know, or that we don't suspect activity in these houses. We have to have a legal, the United States, we have to have legal authority to enter the residence. And that means I have to have probable cause to enter the residence. It's the way the game is played here.
I don't think you want to live in a world where...
No, you don't want me to be able to kick in the door because everybody says I know it's a drug house. I mean, and I know she's not saying that, but I think it's frustrating to people because it frustrates me the same way. That is to protect you from me. Is what that is.
Heather Generet, how did the kid that brought the gun to the Florida or Freeport High School campus obtain it? How did he obtain the gun that he brought to campus? I think is what she's asking.
Yeah, I just want to make sure because that's going to go to trial. But the or it's a criminal case. The short version is he took it from someone else. He didn't buy it. In other words, he didn't necessarily steal it. He became an access from somebody, a family member, that did not realize.
And we haven't talked about it. Was on our list to talk about that. We have not talked about that. We shared the press release that the superintendent's office put out, the school board put out. I think that it's a tough situation for everybody. Yeah. But considering what's been happening as of late,
listen, the truth is, it's not the worst thing. I think for any parent, and if your child hasn't been in problems and you have no issue or anything like that, and then this happens, you're really obviously upset about it. What I would say about it, it's not the worst thing that can happen. The worst thing that can happen is somebody gets hurt by that firearm, right? Inadvertently, however it happens, that somebody else gets, maybe your child wasn't going to use it that way, but somebody else gets a hold of it. There's a lot of bad things can happen. Children and guns do not mix, and certainly not pistols. Certainly not pistols. So, those are, I feel that way, the same way I feel about DUI, right? Being arrested for DUI is not the worst thing that happens to your child. The worst thing that happens is they are killed or they kill somebody else or they're permanently disabled. That's the worst thing. DUI is an inconvenience, a problem, it's terrible, it's you don't like it, but it's better than the alternative.
Yeah. Missy Jenkins, your office does a wonderful job. Don't think it hasn't been appreciated. Velma said you answered wonderfully. David Reynolds, what is the noise ordinance hours for Walton County? Are fines issued after enough calls to the same address?
So the short answer is yes, but it also depends. In other words, so for instance, if the same residents are there and they get a certain number of warnings, yes, fines and or arrests, quite frankly, can be made. But if it's a different person in the same residence, they have to be given the same number of warnings. So if you have a rental in a house and we gave a warning 1 week, and the next week we gave another warning, but to somebody else, and the next week we gave another warning, we don't say, hey, it's the third warning, you're under arrest, because they're different people. So the same people have to get warnings. Typically, the short, easy version of this is if you are non-compliant. In other words, we make contact with you and you don't turn it down, you refuse to turn it down, you get the citation or a trip to jail. That's the short version. The county with code enforcement, they handle it a little bit different. I'm not exactly sure. They issue some fines and things like that. But if we are dealing with the sheriff's officer dealing with it, we expect compliance when we deal with it, which is typically after 10 for us.
It's between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m.
Correct.
So and you say this quite commonly when it comes to noise, it has to be unreasonable.
Yeah, and
cutting your grass at 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning is not unreasonable.
Cutting your grass at 3 o'clock in the morning on Wednesday and school night is unreasonable. Yes. So it just depends on the circumstances.
Great. Okay. Karen Self says, I love it when you're so open to speak to the public. Steve Sunday is watching. Hi, Steve.
Hello, Steve.
Adam Ramsey, I have a friend I'm trying to convince to move here. He is a city cop in Ohio. I believe it's called a lateral transfer. How
Correct.
Does Walton County Sheriff's Office
handle we actually
these?
are paying the state of Florida is giving a $5,000 signing bonus to come to Florida. If you're a law enforcement official from another state and you want to come here, it's about a 40-hour transition course. The sheriff's office actually employ you while you're doing that, pass the state exam. And if they're quality and they got the right temperament, the right personality, right skill set, we'd love to have you. WaltonSO.org.
So impressed.
Oh, thank you. It only took me about 16 years to get that.
Julie Lewis, probably a dumb question. There are no dumb questions, Julie.
I've
heard some
dumb questions.
Okay. Well, okay. But do bike riders legally have to stop when passing by an entrance or exit to a business? For instance, Tom Thumb and Highway 98. It's so scary when trying to pull out and you're only looking for a break in car traffic to pull out, only for a bicycle to fly by right in front of you.
Yeah, they have to clear. So there's the same rules of the road apply to them. They have to clear that. They have to clear that path before they do that. So yeah, it is scary. And probably one of the biggest calls we get too is people mad that that bikers don't use the bike lanes. And I get that call. Sheriff, you're not doing your job. Why don't you make them go on the bike lane? And unfortunately, I cannot make them use the bike lane. Trust me, if I could, I would, but that's not the status.
They're allowed to use the road.
They
However,
have to follow the rules of the road.
They have to follow the rules of the road.
follow the rules of the road, yes.
Yeah. I know this is going to shock you. It's going to shock your conscience, but we're caught up on questions.
Outstanding.
It's 6:45. We've pretty much covered everything that you wanted to talk about, everything we wanted to touch, except for we did a river rescue this weekend.
Yeah. Fortunately, somebody badly injured in that situation.
Badly injured, and it's always, that situation is a realization to me about how vast our skill set needs to be as a sheriff's office.
Sure.
We had a riverboat we put in the water.
Absolutely.
Fire rescue personnel and sheriff's office personnel got in this boat. This person was airlifted by Earhart 2 out of Mariana. We very much appreciate them, but it really shows the different skill sets that our agency has to have.
It's a boat, it's a paramedic, it's a deputy sheriff, and it's a helicopter pilot. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on there, working together, work seamlessly, and communications to get it there and guide them in. So a lot of things going on there, but it's why I think it works well under one house. I mean, I think that fact, the example I always give is years ago, an accident on I-10, and the medic, the paramedic, and the EMT are having to work the person, and it's taking both of them. And a deputy sheriff, Sergeant Leo Cook, jumps in the ambulance and drives the ambulance. You know why? Because it's the sheriff's ambulance.
Yeah.
And there's no question. We're not worried about it. Let's just make it happen. Let's solve the problem and help people. So I love that.
Yeah. James Vatour says, really loved this forum. Well done.
I'm supposed to be taking James to dinner, and I'm late.
Oh.
So, I apologize.
We're gonna wrap up,
Yeah,
James.
we're going to wrap up here. So.
Adam Ramsey, golf cart not street legal with an unlicensed driver. Is that handled the same as a motor vehicle?
Short version is they're towed, ticketed, the whole 9 yards. So
and they have to be street legal if they're on the road in
we'll
Walton
tow
County.
them. We tow them. That's an automatic tow for us.
Yeah.
So.
And Lieutenant Pittman said, and the deputy on the boat was a certified EMT.
So the deputy was an EMT as well too, which is great.
Yeah. Tom Girolami, this is the picture I showed you earlier in the week. He's asking about the cables running across the outfall at Oyster Lake put up by a homeowner. So they were put up by a homeowner.
If that was put up by a homeowner, that is absolutely ludicrous. And that's the nice version of me saying that. So code enforcement should be out there to address that immediately. If they're not, we will follow up with that. In fact, somebody sent us that picture. I will follow up with that myself. That's not acceptable.
Yeah.
What? Never mind. I'm not going to. I'm fixing to go down that path, and I'm not even going to.
Milton.
I'm going to walk that off, Corey.
Yes.
You see how I did that?
Yep. Or swim it off. Because it's. Milton, what measures work best to promote a collaborative relationship between WCSO and our community?
You know what? I think it's communication. I think it's these things. I think when it's like when you tell us what you want, when you tell us what the issues are, when you tell us what your concerns are, we have to listen, to everybody. But I think that's the biggest thing, is to take advantage of the service that you're paying for. If you see somebody that doesn't belong there, call us, right? I mean, it doesn't bother us. So I think it's communication. I mean, this is the thing. Communication is the biggest problem. It's also the biggest opportunity. And that's the reason we do this. Because I am literally waiting for the first person to say, we're not being transparent. And I'm like, hey, buddy, where you been every 2 weeks? Because we're here. Mm-hmm. We're here, and we answer questions, and we don't run from it, and we deal with it. So I think it's communication. I think the more the public engages, the better it is. I don't have any problem with that.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you guys.
Thank you. We will be back in a couple of weeks. We try to do this in a couple of weeks. Lindsay should be having a baby by then, so you're going to be out for a while, right? Hopefully, and so we're about to do it. But if you have a question or concern, something you don't feel like we answered, email us. Let us know. We'll try and get you a little better answer. And listen, it's still a privilege to serve. We enjoy it. We're glad to do it, and we will see you guys in